Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be reviewing one of the most unique books I've ever read, and that is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. And this is an adult fantasy about this country that's living under the tyrannical rule of the Moon Throne, which includes the Emperor and his sons, who are known as the Three Terrors. And the Emperor and his sons all have powers that they inherited from a goddess that they keep imprisoned under the palace. And one day the goddess finally escapes with the help of a guard named June, and they're trying to head to the east with the goal of ending the reign of the Moon Throne. And along the way they also pick up a man named Kima, who is an outcast who's basically trying to figure out his path in life, and he has his own reason for going east that's related to delivering a spear to someone, but he joins June and the goddess on their mission, and this takes place over the course of 5 days. And this was really interesting. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and it was really tricky for me to decide on my final full star rating because I feel like personally this was like a 3.5 star, but I don't know, I feel bad about rounding down, and what ended up pushing it up to 4 is the fact that I've never read a book that was written like this, and I think that it was done very well for what it was trying to do, which is something very different. And I also want to acknowledge the dedication at the start of this book, and it just says, "This one's for me." And I think that's perfect. I love that. And this book definitely feels personal to the author and is telling kind of a personal story, and I respect that. And kind of, I guess in the same vein as with all my reviews, but everything I'm gonna say about this book is my opinion and my own preferences and experiences, and in the end I love that the author wrote this for himself, not for me. So to just start, I guess, laying all this out, what I mean by saying this is so unique and so different. So this has first person, second person, and third person narration. And this is my first time reading a book in the second person. I know that The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin is also a well-known book that has that perspective, and I do own it, but I haven't read that yet. I think this is my first book in reading in the second person. And all 3 of these perspectives are all mixed together in a sort of chaotic setup, and this also has a story within a story narrative. And the character in the you perspective is essentially being shown this story about the Moon Throne, and the first person parts are interjected in the middle of paragraphs, and in the physical book they are shown by being italicized, and they just paint these little moments in time that are relevant to what's happening in that very second in the main plot. And the third person perspective is the main story being told, this fantasy story about the Moon Throne. And most of the book is in this third person perspective, but the other 2 are constantly showing up throughout the whole book. And there are no chapters to this book. It's broken up into sections by each of the 5 days, so each day is one part, and it's also broken up visually into chunks within each day, but they aren't chapters exactly. So if you're someone who has trouble reading books that aren't presented just normally, I don't know, with your standard narration, organized by chapters and things like that, then this will be a hard read. I know that there are people out there who have a hard time following books that have kind of non-traditional structures or writing styles. If you're looking for a unique fantasy that is different and performative, then I think that this could be a good recommendation. The writing in this is very flowery, very metaphorical, with lots of metaphors and similes. It's very vibey, and that is not my preferred style of writing. I like much simpler and straightforward writing. It isn't purple prose, but it was very grand feeling, I guess, and trying to evoke a dreamy quality, and I think that it did that very well. It's just not what I personally love. I do enjoy like mixed media type novels, like Illuminae, for instance. So like books that are different from just your run-of-the-mill book, I do like that, but this is not that. And I think that the world building is a major focus of this book. The world building and the vibes and, you know, these almost vignette type moments, these little snapshots into the world. And the characters of Kima and June didn't feel super deep to me. And neither did most of the other characters. They're all, you know, enveloped in this lofty writing that made me feel like I'm kind of floating above everything, like from afar, rather than being inside the characters' heads. The third person perspective is omniscient narration, so I think that might be part of it, and you know, related to the fact that this is a story within a story. You spend time with, you know, everyone for a little bit, so it feels like you don't really get to know any one of them super well. I still enjoyed the characters though. Don't get me wrong. And it was really only when we finally meet Kima that I actually started to get invested in the story, and that was like about 50 pages in. And the three terrors were great villains. They were at times slightly sympathetic, and then other times you're just like, oh yeah, I hate this guy. Yeah, they're bad. Yeah, I hate them. And there are several animal characters in the book, and they're all great. Basically, the animals were like all fantastic. There are themes of identity and an individual's legacy, and about like how to move forward in life while living with what has happened in the past. There was also a lot of casual violence and blood and gore, so heads up for you if that's something that bothers you. There are some brutal scenes, some like disgusting scenes, and there were also a handful of, you know, cute and very nice scenes as well, beautiful scenes. There is a queer male-male romance that is like a subplot, not a big focus of the story, but there are some explicit love-making scenes, and there was a lot of action in this book. Lots of fighting and skirmishes and daring escapes. It was very epic feeling. There are obstacles in their path that they have to fight or, you know, work with or persuade. And like in particular, I think that things really started to heat up in the third day. That was probably my favorite day. There's a bear involved. That's all I'll say. But all of the days were good. You know, they had their own focus and momentum to them. There are reveals and connections being made all throughout as you learn more about this story that you're being told. But the ending was not my favorite. So in addition to the 5 days, there's also like a before and after kind of sections, like sort of like a prologue and epilogue, but not really. And I thought that the way things unfolded for the main characters at the end of the last day, day 5, was well done. It was appropriate and it fit the tone of what was happening in the book. I appreciated it, but then that changes in the after section, the actual kind of last part of the book, in a way that is certainly a more feel-good ending, but narratively I appreciated and preferred the first ending. I think that the actual ending sort of cheapens what happens cheapens what the characters went through, in my opinion. I can see how others could easily disagree and like the way that the book actually ended, but I didn't really like the direction that it went in that case. So overall, I did enjoy this book, and I appreciate the talent of the author. The author is very talented, he's a good writer, but the prose just wasn't really my style. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't really that invested in the second person parts. Not because it was told in second person, I just didn't really connect personally to the individual, the you, and the story being told there. But I think the author succeeded in the method of storytelling he set out to do, and he did it very well. And I think it's that uniqueness and just how well executed it was that is bumping my half-star rating up to a 4 for Goodreads. So now I'm going to get into spoiler territory for a little bit, where I mostly just kind of like randomly stream of consciousness talk about random parts of the book. So please click away if you don't want to be spoiled, and thank you so much for watching. So I felt so bad for the third terror. Like the first and the second, well, not really, maybe a little bit for the second, but more for the first. Like they had those brief moments where you can feel sympathy and like understand them. But honestly, like I felt so bad for the third terror the whole time once I started learning about how he grew up. He's just he's just this poor, stunted creature that everyone hates, and all he wants is his mom and to be loved. Like the way he just cuddles up next to the bones of his mother, of the god, and is, you know, finally just content, you know, for the first time. Like it was just sad. I was like happy for him in that moment, but you know how he achieved peace, but it was just really tragic. And it took me a while to call that the bird was the third terror. It wasn't really until those three animals, the peacock, the monkey, and the elk, the motif that we hadn't seen before, when they escort Kima and June to the theater, that I kind of put two and two together, because the elk was purple and the bird has purple feathers. So that's what I made the association there, and that's what gave it away for me. And I also just have like a kind of a bit of a shower thought about June. So he's one of our heroes with a terrible past that he's trying to atone for, and that's his struggle. But as far as I can tell, and thinking back, the only reason that he decides to change his ways is because the goddess like messes up his mind and manipulates him. She needed someone to help her escape, and June ended up being the one, and she broke him so that he would help her. And if she hadn't meddled in his mind, like there's no indication that he would have done any of what he did. Like probably just would have kept on killing, and like obviously the point of his character arc is him feeling bad about what he's done and trying to atone, you know, which is good. But I don't know, like he probably wouldn't have tried to change if not for the goddess messing with his brain and doing it for her own ends. So I don't know, I thought it was kind of an interesting thought. And let's see, I loved the tortoises, loved their lore. Rest in peace, Defect. The moment where he's just floating on the river and just listening to the world and the crickets and, you know, feeling peace for the first time was just so sweet and lovely. I was very upset when he was killed. Very upset. So yeah, I feel kind of uncultured about some of my thoughts on this book, mainly regarding what I said about the second person point of view. Like it's just how I feel, because I mean everything is connected in this book. The you perspective is important and probably the most relevant to the author and what kind of story he's trying to tell, and you know the messages he's trying to send. Plus the fact that the man literally interacts with Kima and June. So like I know it's necessary and it's part of the narrative, and I feel kind of bad and dumb for saying that I was more interested in just like the cool fantasy story than I was about, you know, how the story is meant to be you know, a vehicle for meaningful commentary about identity and legacy and things like that. And in the end, it just comes down to my own personal reading taste and preferences and the stories that I want to read most. But, you know, I'm comforted, again, by the author's dedication, because in the end, Simon Jimenez doesn't care if I didn't relate to this book. Not to say that I didn't get it or didn't understand it. It just wasn't personally, I wasn't personally as moved by it as others might be. And I'm glad that I read this. It was a good book, and I want to give a personal thank you to my friend Cove, who loved this book and recommended it to me in the first place. So thank you, Cove, and thank you who is watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!